I stood in the courthouse parking lot, staring at strangers who were bidding on the very house I lived in. 15,000, going once. The auctioneer's voice bounced off the concrete walls, cold and final. I couldn't stop asking myself, how did it come to this? It all traced back to my HOA president, Karen Whitmore. She was the one who decided that the windows in my home, windows she had personally signed off on, were suddenly illegal. She acted like she could ruin my life over home improvements I had written approval for. But Karen overlooked one crucial detail. She didn't realize I'm the kind of man who documents everything. Every single lie. Every single threat. Every ridiculous violation notice from those soul-crushing HOA meetings, I had it all filed away. Fast forward 5 years from that nightmare. Now, I'm standing with a $75,000 check in my hand. And you know whose name is scrawled across the bottom? That's right, Karen Whitmore's. She had no clue what storm she started when she picked a fight with the wrong electrician. So let me ask you, what would you do if your HOA tried to take your house over renovations they already approved? Drop it in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I want to see how far this story reaches. My name's Marcus Ricks. I'm 52 years old, a union electrician by trade, and I thought I knew what real power looked like. Turns out, I had no clue, until I came face to face with the kind of power a clipboard and a bad attitude can carry. After my divorce, I needed a stable home where my daughter Emma could spend weekends. She was 16 at the time and already dealing with enough turbulence. What she needed was consistency. And that's what I wanted for her. That's how I ended up in Willowbrook Estates. It looked like the perfect neighborhood, quiet streets, kids riding bikes, summer evenings filled with the smell of barbecue drifting over fences. The house itself needed work, but that didn't scare me. Fixing things is what I do best. The biggest problem? Those drafty 1973 windows. They were single-pane aluminum, practically funnels for cold air in the winter. I'd been bleeding money every season. So, I did my homework for months, researching replacements, checking energy efficiency, comparing styles. Eventually, I found exactly what I needed, double-pane vinyl windows that were both efficient and historically fitting for the house. And here's where I made my very first mistake. I trusted the system. Like a good homeowner, I submitted my architectural request, photos, specs, contractor licenses, the full package. According to the HOA bylaws, they had 30 days to reply. On day 28, I got my approval letter. Clear as day, request approved. Signed by the architectural committee. Everything was by the book. Licensed contractors, city permits, proper inspections. The windows were installed flawlessly, and my heating bill dropped in half. For 2 weeks, I thought I'd hit the jackpot. Then, Karen Whitmore decided to destroy me. Karen was HOA president, and she ruled Willowbrook like a tyrant. By profession, she was a real estate agent. By personality, she was a control freak of the highest order. Imagine someone who enjoys making other people squirm, and you'll have a picture of Karen. Blonde bob that sat like a helmet. Leather portfolio carried like a shield. And a smile that could freeze boiling water. I was flipping burgers for Emma one afternoon when my phone lit up with an email notification. Mr. Ricks, your unauthorized modifications are unacceptable. I blinked. Unauthorized? I replied immediately, Karen, I have written approval. Her answer came sharp, approval was conditional pending final board review. I scrolled back to my letter. No conditions. No fine print. Just one word, approved. I called her out on it. She hung up. Click. Deadline. That Tuesday, I marched into the community center with my approval letter in hand, confident I could set the record straight. Big mistake. The place reeked of burnt coffee and hopelessness. Karen sat at a folding table like a judge at a war crimes trial. Your window installation violates community standards, she declared, sliding a violation notice across the table as if sentencing me. I held up my letter. You already signed off. Approval does not guarantee compliance, she snapped, scratching her pen across another form with bureaucratic vengeance. A $500 fine. Due in 30 days. $500, for following their rules. I glanced around at my neighbors for support. Nothing. Every set of eyes dropped. The silence pressed down like a weight. That's when I understood. Karen wasn't enforcing rules. She was making examples. The violation notice came loaded with fine print that made my stomach turn. Fines double monthly until resolved. That night, I dug into the HOA paperwork like a man tracing faulty wiring. The math was brutal. Month 1, $500. Month 2, $1,000. Month 3, $2,000. My post-divorce budget couldn't withstand that kind of hit. And when I reached out to lawyers, they wanted $5,000 up front just to read my case. I was cornered. Either I gave in to Karen's ransom or went bankrupt trying to fight it. But what Karen didn't realize was this: electricians are problem solvers. We troubleshoot until we find the break in the system. And in this case, Karen herself was the short circuit. Because while driving through Willowbrook one weekend, I started counting houses. And what I found left me stunned. 47 homes had the exact same vinyl windows I'd installed. Not one of those homeowners had received a violation notice. Not one. Karen wasn't protecting the neighborhood. She was running a racket. And I had just been marked as her next target. The question was, why me? What made me different from those 47 others? I was about to find out. And the answer would flip my entire world upside down. Karen's retaliation didn't take long. Just 2 weeks after I had called her bluff at that community meeting, I opened my mailbox to find a certified letter that felt like a coiled snake waiting to strike. Inside was a property lien notice, for $2,000. My hands actually trembled as I read the breakdown. That original $500 fine had mutated into something grotesque. Late fees. Administrative expenses. Enforcement costs. She had found a way to turn bureaucracy into a weapon. But the real gut punch came in paragraph 3. Failure to satisfy lien may result in foreclosure proceedings. Foreclosure. Over windows she had personally approved. That evening, I called Janet Bennett, my 73-year-old neighbor who kept Willowbrook's most beautiful garden. Her voice was unsteady when she answered, and I instantly knew Karen had gotten to her too. "Oh Marcus," she whispered, "I'm glad you called. Karen came by yesterday asking about you, whether you were keeping up financially, if Emma still visited often, if your yard looked maintained." Marcus, her pause felt like a held breath. "She's building a case against you." Then came Janet's confession, the one that cracked everything wide open. "She did the same thing to me last year. Said my garden gnomes violated community standards. I'm 73. I just moved them rather than fight." After we hung up, I sat in front of my laptop all night, bleary-eyed, digging into Ohio property law like it was a survival manual. My electrical instructor's old advice echoed in my head: know the code before you run the wire. Turns out HOA liens work the same way. If you don't follow the code, the law, they fall apart. And Ohio law couldn't have been clearer. Before filing a lien, HOAs are required to provide proper written notice and a 30-day window to fix the alleged violation. Karen had skipped that step entirely. Her lien wasn't just shaky, it was built on sand. The next morning, I drove down to the county recorder's office, buried in the basement of a government building that smelled like mold and paper decay. And there it was, Karen's fatal mistake. Her lien filing was missing 3 required documents. She had cut corners, assuming a blue-collar electrician would never catch it. She was wrong. I photocopied everything, filed my legal challenge, and walked out with the first real sense of power I'd felt in months. The buzz in my veins was stronger than any current I'd ever wired. But if I thought Karen would back down, I was dead wrong. Within days, she called an emergency board meeting to rewrite the rules. The community center's air felt thick with hostility when I arrived. The smell of burnt coffee lingered like it always did, only this time it was mixed with Karen's desperation. The board has determined that previous approvals were issued in error, she announced, reading stiffly from a script. All non-conforming windows must be replaced within 60 days. I stood up, my work boots thudding across the linoleum floor. You can't change approvals retroactively, Karen. That's breach of contract. You're out of order, Mr. Hicks, she shot back. No, you're out of line, I countered, holding up my research like it was a lottery ticket. Your lien is invalid. You never gave proper notice under state law. For a moment, her face went pale. Then it flushed white, then red, then nearly purple. This meeting is adjourned, she barked. But the damage was done. I had humiliated her in front of the board. And Karen Whitmore was the type who collected grudges the way others collect stamps. The backlash came quick. Within a week, I started getting calls from a collections agency, Debt Recovery Solutions, some outfit out of Columbus that specialized in tormenting homeowners. Mr. Hicks, you owe $2,400. We can garnish your wages and freeze your accounts. That lien is invalid, I snapped. I filed a legal challenge. Our client says otherwise, the collector droned. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. Emma noticed it during her weekend visits. 16 years old, and sharp enough to see straight through me. Dad, you look exhausted. What's going on? How do you explain to your daughter that the neighborhood bully is trying to take your home? I couldn't. So I hugged her and mumbled, just boring grown-up stuff, sweetheart. That's when I doubled down on documenting everything. I turned the spare bedroom into what looked like a war room. Timelines plastered across one wall. Copies of every letter, every email, every notice. Photos of windows across the neighborhood. If Karen wanted a fight, I was learning the rules better than she did. And then I saw the pattern. Of the 47 homes with the same windows as mine, not one belonged to a renter, a minority family, or a working-class household. Those folks, the ones like me, were the ones getting violations. Her country club friends. The banker's wife. Realtors she played golf with. They got friendly reminders or nothing at all. What I was staring at wasn't random enforcement. It was systematic discrimination. And Karen was just getting started. Her next move was her most ruthless yet, hiring a high-powered attorney from Columbus. His letter arrived on thick, cream-colored letterhead that probably cost more than my electric bill. Notice of intent to foreclose. You have 30 days to satisfy all obligations or face sheriff's sale. Sheriff's sale. Those two words felt like grabbing a live wire with bare hands. That weekend, I grabbed my tape measure and my camera, not for wiring, but for evidence. If Karen wanted war, I was going to map out every single one of her selective attacks. House by house, street by street, I documented it all. The crunch of autumn leaves under my boots followed me as I photographed vinyl windows identical to mine, windows that never drew so much as a warning. And what I uncovered made my stomach churn. Mrs. Patterson on Elm Street, the bank president's wife, had the exact same windows, installed the same month as mine, by the same contractor. Instead of a violation, HOA minutes praised her for community-minded improvements. 3 blocks over, Carlos Martinez, a mechanic who rented his house, got hit with violation after violation for the very same windows. Same product. Same style. Same installation. The only difference? Status. Back home, my evidence room grew into something between a detective's office and a crime lab. Blue pins marked Karen's friends. Red pins marked people like me. The red pins told a story so obvious, it made my hands shake. And then, Janet Bennett called. Her voice was a whisper, as though Karen could be listening through the walls. "Marcus, I found something. Something you need to see. Can you come over quietly?" Her kitchen smelled of jasmine tea and decades of unspoken fear. With trembling fingers, she handed me a manila folder. I saved everything from when Karen came after me. Thought maybe someone braver would need it. Inside was dynamite disguised as paper. Emails. Notes. Internal messages. And one email that stopped me cold. "We need to be strategic about enforcement. Target renters and blue-collar types first. They're less likely to have legal resources to fight back." Karen had profiled me from day one. She wasn't just enforcing rules. She was discriminating, systematically, intentionally, and for profit. "Janet," I said, my voice low, "this is a smoking gun. Why didn't you fight?" Her wrinkled hands folded the folder shut. "Because I'm a 73-year-old Chinese widow, Marcus. And Karen runs this place like her empire. Who would have believed me?" That night, I dove into federal fair housing law until my eyes burned from the screen. And what I found made my pulse race. Selective enforcement based on race or economic class isn't just unfair. It's illegal. Karen wasn't just a neighborhood tyrant. She was breaking federal law. The next morning, my hands still shaking, I called Ohio legal aid. The intake worker's tone changed the second I explained what I had. "Sir, if you can document systematic patterns, this is a federal fair housing case. How much evidence do you have?" I looked at the 3 boxes stacked in my evidence room. 5 years' worth. "Hold everything. Don't talk to anyone. We're assigning you an attorney immediately." 2 days later, I walked into a conference room that smelled like coffee and fresh hope. Across from me sat Sarah Martinez, an attorney whose eyes lit up with each piece of evidence I laid out. "Marcus," she said, tapping the timeline I'd built, "this is textbook discrimination. Selective enforcement. Economic profiling. Karen violated half a dozen federal laws." She leaned in, her eyes sharp. "And she made one fatal mistake, she picked an electrician to bully. And electricians know how to trace problems back to the source." Karen wasn't giving up. Not by a long shot. Her attorney filed for an expedited foreclosure, claiming I posed an imminent threat to the stability of the community. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, just 4 days away. Thursday night, Emma found me hunched over stacks of legal briefs and half-empty coffee cups, my eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Dad," she said softly, "are they really trying to take our house?" I pulled her into a hug, inhaling the strawberry scent of her shampoo. "Remember when that kid Tyler kept stealing your lunch money until you finally told the principal?" She nodded. "Yeah. He got suspended." "Exactly. Bullies don't stop until someone forces them to. Karen's been stealing people's lunch money for years. Tomorrow, I'm telling the principal." Emma squeezed my hand. "Good. Tyler needed that lesson, too." Friday morning was cold and gray. Walking into the courthouse with 3 boxes of evidence, I spotted Karen across the hall. She looked sharp in an expensive suit, that smug little smirk glued to her face. She thought I was just a scared electrician with no chance against her machine. She was about to learn otherwise. The courtroom felt like a freezer. Sweat still ran down my back as Judge Patricia Morrison sifted through the files. Karen sat stiff beside her lawyer, radiating confidence, the kind of confidence that comes from never having been challenged by someone like me. "Your Honor," her attorney began smoothly, "Mr. Hicks has willfully violated community covenants for 18 months. The HOA has shown remarkable patience, but his continued defiance threatens neighborhood stability." Remarkable patience. I almost laughed. Then Sarah Martinez rose, calm as a gunslinger in a Western duel. Your Honor, we are filing a federal fair housing counterclaim. Our evidence shows systematic discrimination targeting minority and working-class residents. She popped open my first evidence box and spread photos across the table like a winning poker hand. We have 5 years of proof of selective enforcement, she said. The judge's eyebrows shot up. Karen's lawyer paled. This was never supposed to be about discrimination, it was supposed to be a quick foreclosure. But Sarah wasn't done. She pulled out Janet Bennett's folder, the one full of damning emails. Your Honor, here are internal HOA communications explicitly discussing strategies for targeting based on economic status and likelihood of legal defense. Then she read it aloud, target renters and blue-collar types first. They're less likely to fight back. The courtroom went so silent, even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment. Judge Morrison leaned forward, her expression sharpening like a blade. Karen's face twisted from shock to panic to barely contained rage. She leaned into her lawyer, whispering furiously. But the damage was already spreading like an electrical fire through dry timber. Your Honor, Sarah continued, 47 houses in Willowbrook Estates have identical window installations. Not a single violation was issued against residents with ties to the HOA president. Yet every working-class or minority homeowner faced fines. That is systematic discrimination. The judge called a 30-minute recess. Karen's lawyer spent every second pacing and on the phone, probably with his malpractice insurer. When court resumed, Judge Morrison's tone was different. This court is deeply troubled by allegations of discriminatory enforcement. The foreclosure case is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, I am ordering a full investigation of HOA practices and referring this matter to the federal prosecutor's office. Karen's composure cracked. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by raw panic. She had just realized this wasn't about my house anymore, this was about federal crimes. Walking out of that courthouse felt like stepping into sunlight after a storm. But Karen wasn't finished. Desperate people make desperate moves. The harassment campaign escalated overnight. First came anonymous complaints to the city about my unlicensed electrical work. Code enforcement knocked 3 times in 2 weeks. They found nothing, but every inspection cost me work hours and lost pay. Then someone, gee, I wonder who, reported my truck as a commercial vehicle violation. Tickets started appearing, even when I was parked legally. The phone calls came next. Heavy breathing. Hang-ups. Mumbled threats through disguised voices. Drop the lawsuit, or you'll regret it. It was classic intimidation. But the breaking point came when Emma called me from school, her voice trembling. Dad, someone told my guidance counselor they were worried about neglect. About you. They had dragged my 16-year-old into the war. That night, I sat in my evidence room staring at 5 years of documentation, emails, notices, patterns, financial records. Karen had run Willowbrook like a queen ruling her kingdom, driving out anyone who didn't fit her vision. But buried in those files was a discovery that made my blood run hot. Property tax records. Karen owned 3 rental houses in Willowbrook through an LLC, KW Holdings. Properties she had never disclosed to the board. Properties with the same illegal windows she fined me for. She had been enforcing violations selectively to manipulate property values for her own gain. It wasn't just discrimination. It was corruption. She had turned HOA authority into a business model. That night, I called Sarah Martinez at home. My voice shook with adrenaline. Sarah, I found it. The smoking gun. What is it? She asked. Karen owns rental properties in the neighborhood. Properties with the exact same windows she's been fining others for. And she never disclosed them to the board. Her silence stretched for a long moment. Marcus, she finally said, you just turned this from a discrimination case into a federal RICO investigation. Karen's been running a criminal enterprise. And she had no idea that she had just awakened a federal task force. 3 weeks after Sarah's call to the federal prosecutors, I found myself awake at midnight in my evidence room, coffee gone cold beside me, printer spitting out county property records like an assembly line. That's when everything finally clicked. I had been cross-referencing 5 years of HOA board decisions with real estate sales in Willowbrook. And suddenly, the full scope of Karen's scam lit up like a circuit board. KW Holdings LLC, a Delaware shell company registered under Karen's husband, Kevin Whitmore, had quietly bought 3 neighborhood homes in the past 4 years. Each purchase came within 6 months of the previous owners being buried in HOA violations. It wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern. The Martinez house on Oak Street. Carlos was hit with endless fines for windows, deck repairs, and landscaping. The pressure broke him, he sold under market value just to get free. KW Holdings swooped in with a cash offer 20% below asking. The Thompsons on Pine Street. Elderly couple. Fined for their fence, their shed, even their holiday lights. After 18 brutal months of escalating threats, they sold too. Guess who bought it? KW Holdings. The Bennett property. Janet's late husband's tool shed was suddenly illegal. Harassment after harassment until her daughter begged her to sell and move into assisted living. Karen's LLC bought that one too. I could feel my hands shaking as I traced the money trail. This wasn't just harassment. It was systematic. Karen had been targeting vulnerable families, minorities, renters, the elderly, people without resources, forcing them into desperation, then snapping up their homes at a discount. And the worst part? One of those rental properties had my exact same windows. Same brand. Same contractor. Same style. Karen had been collecting rent on a house that violated the very rules she tried to foreclose on me for. When I dug deeper, I found insurance records. KW Holdings had filed a homeowner's claim for storm damage, on those same windows. They pocketed $8,000 for replacements that supposedly violated HOA standards. Karen wasn't just corrupt. She was running a racket. Over 4 years, KW Holdings had acquired nearly $500,000 in property for pennies on the dollar, profiting over $160,000. It made me sick. And then I found the smoking gun. A county email, buried in the system. Karen had submitted a complaint about declining property values due to non-conforming improvements. The very same month her LLC bought the Martinez house. She was citing her own enforcement abuse to justify lowball purchases. She had practically written her own indictment. I called Sarah at 6 in the morning. "Sarah," I said, my voice hoarse, "I found it. She's been running a real estate scam with HOA power. This isn't just abuse. It's a criminal conspiracy." She exhaled slowly, then said, "Marcus, what you just described is racketeering. This isn't an HOA fight anymore. This is federal organized crime." By noon, Sarah had assembled what looked like a legal SWAT team in her conference room. Rebecca Bennett, a forensic accountant with a talent for sniffing out shady money trails. David Rodriguez, a federal housing discrimination expert. And the heavy hitter, Assistant U.S. Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a corruption prosecutor from the Southern District of Ohio. Sarah outlined the plan like a master electrician drawing up a wiring schematic. RICO requires a pattern of criminal activity. We've got 5 years of systematic property manipulation. That's our pattern. Rebecca tapped her laptop, grinning. And the money trail is almost too easy. They used the same bank account for HOA dues and property purchases. Every home they acquired correlates directly with HOA enforcement actions. But documents alone weren't enough. They needed witnesses. That's where Janet Bennett became the secret weapon. Despite her age and her fear, she had meticulous records of harassment campaigns. More importantly, she kept contact with families Karen had forced out. The Patels moved to Toledo, she whispered at one kitchen table strategy session. Maria Santos went back to Puerto Rico. The Johnsons ended up in Kentucky. But they all kept paperwork. They knew something wasn't right. Over the next week, I turned into a detective. Phone calls. Long drives. Conversations with tearful former neighbors. Every single story was the same. Harassment. Escalating fines. Forced sale. KW Holdings swooping in with cash. When I explained what was really going on, Mr. Patel broke down over the phone. We lost everything. 40 years of savings gone. We thought we just had bad luck. It wasn't bad luck. It was a calculated scheme. David Rodriguez, the discrimination expert, compiled the data. The statistics were damning. 93% of violations were issued to minority or working-class families. 0 to Karen's social circle. This isn't just bias, David said. This is engineered discrimination for profit. That makes it criminal conspiracy. Meanwhile, Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh was already coordinating with the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit. She admitted Karen had been on their radar for suspicious property deals. Your case is the missing link, Walsh told me. You've got intent. You've got documentation. She's not just violating HOA rules, she's running a criminal enterprise. My garage turned into a crime lab. 3 long tables stacked with property records, timelines, financial transactions, victim statements. Red string connected everything like a spiderweb. Emma pitched in after school. 16 years old and sharper than most lawyers. She highlighted dates and flagged bank transfers. Dad, she said one night, Karen's like a landlord who breaks your house just so she can buy it cheap. I looked at her, proud and pained at the same time. That's exactly what she is, sweetheart. But we're going to stop her. The most damning discovery came when Sarah pulled Karen's real estate license history. Back in 2018, she had been disciplined for selling property to relatives without disclosure. Her license was suspended for 6 months. Karen was a repeat offender. She just got better at hiding her schemes. Sarah began drafting the lawsuit, her voice steady but electric with purpose. We're filing for RICO, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, conspiracy, tax evasion, the works. Damages in the 6 figures. And Marcus, this isn't just about you. This is about dismantling an 8-year criminal operation. Assistant U.S. Attorney Walsh leaned back, smiling grimly. I love it when defendants keep perfect records of their own crimes. Karen's been documenting our case for 5 years. We're just going to use her work against her. And that was the moment I realized, Karen Whitmore wasn't just the HOA president. She was the head of a criminal organization disguised as one. And we were about to bring her entire empire down. Karen's desperation started sparking like a short circuit. The morning after the news of the federal investigation broke, I noticed a rusted Camry parked across the street. Inside sat a man with a camera pointed at my house. When Emma stepped out to catch her school bus, he started snapping photos. That crossed every line I had. I stomped up to his car, gravel crunching under my boots loud enough to rattle the air. You want to tell me why you're photographing my 16-year-old daughter? He rolled down the window, cigarette smoke spilling out like guilt. Relax, pal. Public street, public photography. Just doing a job. Whose job? I demanded. He smirked and drove off. No answer needed. By noon, I knew Karen had hired a private investigator to dig for dirt that didn't exist. And her campaign kicked into overdrive. The PI went door to door asking neighbors questions about me, whether I drank too much, if Emma seemed neglected, if strange people came around. Classic smear tactics. Janet Bennett called immediately, furious. Marcus, some man came asking if you were a drunk and if Emma was cared for properly. I told him to get off my property or I'd call the police. Karen's strategy was transparent: if she couldn't win on facts, she'd try to destroy my reputation. But what she didn't count on was that Willowbrook had changed. The neighbors she'd terrorized for years had found their backbone. Mrs. Patterson, the bank president's wife, called me that evening. "Marcus, that investigator tried to ask me about you. I told him you're the best neighbor we've ever had. And if he comes back, my husband will have bank security escort him off the block." Even Carlos Martinez called. "Hey man, that PI came sniffing around. I told him you fixed my electrical panel for free last winter. Anyone messing with you is messing with all of us." The community Karen had spent years dividing was now uniting against her. But Karen wasn't finished with her dirty tricks. Wednesday morning brought a knock at my door. A social worker stood there with a clipboard, looking nervous but polite. "Mr. Hicks, I'm Mrs. Henderson with Child Protective Services. We received an anonymous report about possible neglect. The caller claimed your daughter appears malnourished and that your home environment is unstable due to ongoing legal issues." My blood boiled, but I invited her in. Poured her a cup of coffee. Showed her my evidence room, a wall-to-wall command center of documents, photos, and timelines, neatly organized like a prosecutor's dream. She blinked in disbelief. "Sir, whoever reported this was misinformed, or malicious. Your home shows clear evidence of a devoted parent fighting for his family. This case is closed." Then she added in a low voice, "And between you and me, keep fighting. You're doing the right thing." Karen's plan backfired again. Thursday morning, it shifted to financial warfare. Someone, who could it be, filed a complaint with the state licensing board, accusing me of operating without proper credentials and doing unsafe electrical work. The inspector who showed up was Pete Kowalski, a 20-year veteran who'd seen every scam in the book. He spent an hour reviewing my licenses, permits, insurance, and client references. "Marcus, your paperwork's cleaner than most contractors I deal with," he said, shaking his head. "This is a frivolous complaint filed with malicious intent. I'll note that in the record." By Friday, Karen's desperation reached peak stupidity. A towing company pulled up in front of my house. "Sir," the driver explained, "we got a call demanding your truck be towed for violating residential parking ordinances." I stared at him. "I'm parked in my own driveway." "That's what we figured," he said. "Want us to call the police?" "Yes. Please do." 20 minutes later, Officer Janet Rodriguez, no relation to our housing expert, was standing in my driveway writing Karen a citation for harassment and filing false reports. Watching her try to explain herself to a police officer while half the neighborhood watched from their porches was the best show Willowbrook had seen in years. "Ma'am," the officer said, "this is the third unfounded complaint against Mr. Hicks this week. I suggest you seek legal counsel before this escalates into criminal harassment charges." That evening, Sarah Martinez called with news that made me grin for the first time in weeks. "Karen's lawyer is desperate. He's called our office 3 times asking about settlement talks. They started at $10,000. Now they're at $50,000 plus her resignation from the HOA board." I laughed out loud. "So she's finally bleeding." "Exactly," Sarah said. "She's burning money on legal fees and investigators while her case crumbles." But the most telling sign came Sunday morning. Emma spotted Karen herself, slowly driving past our house at dawn, staring at the federal investigation warning signs Sarah had taped in our windows. "Dad," Emma said, peeking out, she looked scared. And for the first time, I saw it too. Karen Whitmore, the woman who had terrorized this neighborhood for years, was finally realizing what it felt like to be the target. Karen's final trick came on a Tuesday morning that started like any other, until Officer Rodriguez knocked on my door. Her face was professional, but her eyes carried sympathy. "Marcus, I hate to do this, but Karen Whitmore has filed for a restraining order. She claims you've been stalking and threatening her. Judge Patterson wants to see you at 2 o'clock. I nearly laughed. Stalking? From the same woman who hired a PI to photograph my daughter at her bus stop. Officer, I've got 8 weeks of security footage showing I've never gone near her house. She sighed. Save it for the judge. But between you and me, her story doesn't add up. At the courthouse, Karen sat beside her fourth attorney in as many months. Gone was the polished, commanding HOA president. In her place was a trembling victim, dressed conservatively, makeup minimal, hair pulled back like she'd just stepped out of a Sunday school class. Her lawyer began dramatically, "Your Honor, my client has endured months of harassment. Mr. Hicks has been photographing her property, following her to work, and making threatening calls." Judge Patterson frowned. "Do you have evidence of these claims?" "Well, Your Honor, my client fears for her safety based on his aggressive behavior and the ongoing federal investigation." Sarah Martinez rose with deliberate calm, her briefcase snapping open like a gunshot. "Your Honor, we have comprehensive proof these allegations are fabricated. Security camera footage, phone records, GPS logs from Mr. Hicks's work vehicle, and witness statements." She handed over a thumb drive. Every incident she described is accounted for. At the exact times, Mr. Hicks was either on job sites miles away or at home with his daughter. The judge spent 15 minutes reviewing the evidence while Karen's face cycled through shades of panic. Finally, he looked up, unimpressed. "Ms. Whitmore, filing false police reports is a crime. This petition is denied. I'm also referring your complaint to the prosecutor's office for possible perjury charges." Karen's attorney whispered frantically in her ear, but the damage was done. She had tried to flip the narrative, and it backfired spectacularly. Walking out of the courthouse that day felt like dodging a bullet. But I also knew something else. Karen was running out of options, which made her more dangerous than ever. That evening, Emma called me at work, her voice tight with fear. "Dad, someone broke into the house. I broke every speed limit getting home. My evidence room looked like a tornado had ripped through it, documents scattered, photos torn down, computer equipment smashed. But whoever did this wasn't a pro. They missed the backup drives hidden in my closet, and the duplicate files already sitting in Sarah's office." Officer Rodriguez arrived minutes later, flashlight sweeping across the wreckage. "This wasn't random vandalism," she said flatly. "Someone was looking for specific documents." "Any idea who?" I gave her a look. "Only one person desperate enough to risk a felony to destroy evidence." Karen had made her biggest mistake yet. By trying to cover her tracks, she had committed a brand new crime, obstruction of justice. And prosecutors love obstruction charges. They're simple, obvious, and carry heavy penalties. The very next morning, I got served with yet another set of papers. KW Holdings, the very company she swore she had no connection to, was suing me for defamation and business interference. They wanted $200,000 in damages, claiming my accusations were ruining their investments. I brought the papers straight to Sarah. She couldn't stop laughing. "Marcus, this is perfect. She's admitting under oath that she owns KW Holdings and that our investigation is hurting her business. That's a confession, not a lawsuit." I blinked. "How is that good?" "Because now the feds can use her own filing as evidence of intent. She's literally suing you for exposing her crimes." But then Karen escalated in a way that chilled me to the bone. Thursday night, Emma was studying at the kitchen table when a brick came crashing through the front window. Attached was a note scrawled in block letters. "Drop the lawsuit or lose more than windows." That was no longer harassment. That was terrorism. I dialed 911 immediately. Within an hour, FBI agents were dusting my living room for fingerprints while neighbors gathered outside, outraged and ready to support us. Mrs. Patterson brought Emma hot chocolate. Carlos Martinez offered to install new security cameras. Janet Bennett stood guard at the door with a rolling pin like a 73-year-old bodyguard. "Mr. Hicks," FBI agent Sarah Kim said while photographing the brick, "we're treating this as witness intimidation in a federal case. That's a separate felony. Up to 20 years in prison." Karen had just upgraded herself from corrupt HOA tyrant to federal terrorist suspect. And the FBI wasn't about to let that slide. The very next morning, Agent Kim called with the news I'd been waiting for. "Marcus, we arrested Karen Whitmore at 6 a.m. She's facing charges for racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, housing discrimination, obstruction of justice, and witness intimidation." I exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. "What's she looking at?" I asked. 40 years if convicted on all counts. Karen Whitmore had finally met the one authority she couldn't bully, the United States Department of Justice. The emergency HOA meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 7 p.m., but by the time I arrived half an hour early, the parking lot was already overflowing. Cars lined the street for blocks. License plates from neighboring counties showed this wasn't just a neighborhood meeting anymore, this was an event. Karen Whitmore's federal arrest had made the evening news, and people came to see the finale. Inside, the community center buzzed with an energy I'd never felt there before. The smell of coffee mingled with the hum of anticipation. Neighbors who had barely spoken in years were swapping horror stories about Karen like veterans comparing war wounds. "Marcus." Janet Bennett waved me over to the front row where she had saved seats, her eyes twinkling. "Channel 6 is here, and the Columbus Dispatch too." Even the county commissioner showed up. Sarah Martinez arrived moments later, briefcase in hand, her expression cool and satisfied, the look of someone about to deliver professional justice. Photographers jockeyed for angles, their camera shutters clicking like crickets in the quiet. At exactly 7 o'clock, the remaining HOA board members shuffled in, looking like kids headed to detention. Board Secretary Helen Morrison, no relation to Judge Morrison, called the meeting to order with a shaky voice. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're here to address recent developments regarding former HOA President Karen Whitmore." The room fell silent except for the whir of camera shutters. Due to criminal charges filed by federal prosecutors, Karen Whitmore has resigned all HOA positions effective immediately. The board extends apologies to any residents who experienced inappropriate enforcement actions. Inappropriate enforcement actions. Even now, they couldn't bring themselves to say the word discrimination. That's when Sarah stood, her heels striking the linoleum with precision. She set her briefcase on the presenter's table and pulled out a settlement check that seemed to glow under the fluorescent lights. "Ladies and gentlemen, I represent not only Marcus Hicks but every family Karen Whitmore targeted over the past 8 years. Tonight, I'm here to announce the terms of her civil settlement." The crowd collectively leaned forward. You could hear the heating system humming in the background. Karen Whitmore's criminal enterprise has been dismantled by federal authorities. As part of her settlement, Marcus Hicks is awarded $75,000 in damages for harassment, discrimination, and attempted property theft. The applause was instant and thunderous, bursting like a dam giving way. Emma clapped so hard her hands must have stung. Neighbors hugged. Reporters filmed as if it were a championship celebration. But Sarah wasn't finished. In addition, Karen Whitmore is permanently barred from holding any HOA leadership position in Ohio. KW Holdings LLC has been dissolved. All properties acquired through harassment will be sold at fair market value under court supervision. More applause shook the room, but Sarah raised her hand for quiet. Most importantly, this case has set precedent. Never again in this state can HOA leaders use community authority for personal profit without risking federal prosecution. The silence that followed was electric. That's when I stood, boots echoing on the floor as I walked to the microphone. The crowd hushed again, not out of fear this time, but respect. 8 months ago, I thought I was fighting one woman over windows. Tonight, I see this was about something bigger. We proved that when ordinary people document, unite, and refuse to back down, corruption doesn't stand a chance. The standing ovation lasted 3 solid minutes. Even the county commissioner was on his feet, clapping like his own reputation depended on it. Channel SXS reporter caught me as I stepped down. "Mr. Hicks, what's your message to other homeowners facing HOA abuse?" I looked straight into the camera. Document everything. Build alliances. And remember this, bullies rely on your silence. When communities unite, corruption crumbles. The celebration spilled into the parking lot afterward. Plans for a Freedom from Harassment Day festival were already being discussed. Carlos Martinez announced he was running for HOA president, promising transparency and fairness. Mrs. Patterson offered to host a legal rights workshop in her backyard. But the best moment came when Emma wrapped her arms around me by my truck. "Dad," she whispered into my shoulder, "I'm proud of you. You didn't just fight for us, you fought for everyone." Looking around at neighbors laughing instead of hiding, planning instead of fearing, I knew she was right. This wasn't about windows. Or fines. Or even the $75,000. This was about proving that justice isn't reserved for the wealthy, it belongs to anyone willing to stand up, document the truth, and refuse to bow down. Karen had spent 8 years teaching Willowbrook to live in fear. That night, we taught her, and the whole state, that fear works both ways. 6 months later, life in Willowbrook looked completely different. I was in my backyard, watching Emma practice her college application presentation. The same vinyl windows that started this whole mess sparkled in the afternoon sun like a reminder of everything we had survived. The settlement money had changed more than just my bank account, it had transformed an entire neighborhood. From that $75,000, I set aside $25,000 to establish the Willowbrook Estate Scholarship Fund. Just last month, the fund awarded its very first grants. Emma earned $500 for her essay about standing up to injustice, money she planned to put toward her pre-law studies at Ohio State. "Dad, listen to this part," she said one evening, reading from her laptop. "My father taught me that documentation beats intimidation, community beats corruption, and ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to stay silent." Hearing those words filled me with a pride that felt like good voltage running through clean wiring. The rest of the settlement had gone back into the community too. $15,000 funded playground improvements. Last week, we held a ribbon-cutting ceremony. Over 300 residents came to watch their kids swing and laugh where once we all tiptoed under Karen's constant threats. Carlos Martinez ran for HOA president and won in a landslide. His first move was monthly financial reporting and mandatory conflict of interest disclosures for board members. His second? Commissioning a bronze plaque at the community center dedicated to those who had stood up to corruption. Janet Bennett now leads garden tours, proudly showing off the gnomes Karen once banned. Marcus taught us that standing up to bullies isn't just about protecting yourself, she told visitors. It's about protecting the next person they'd target. We even seeded a legal defense fund with $10,000 from the settlement. Already, it had helped 3 families in nearby counties fight HOA abuse. Sarah Martinez liked to joke that my case had created a whole new cottage industry for HOA accountability law. And she wasn't wrong. Across Ohio, attorneys were citing Hicks versus Whitmore as precedent. Meanwhile, Karen's downfall read like something straight out of a prosecutor's handbook. She plea bargained, landing 3 years in federal prison and 5 more under supervised probation. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. KW Holdings was dissolved, its illegally acquired properties sold off at auction. One of those properties, the Patel home, was bought back by the family through restitution money. When Mr. Patel called me, his voice shook with emotion. "Marcus, we never thought we'd see justice. Thank you for fighting when we couldn't." That call alone was worth more than the settlement check. But the ripples spread even further. Ohio House Bill 247, the HOA Transparency Act, passed unanimously in March. I testified at the bill signing, sitting beside Governor Richardson as he signed into law new safeguards, conflict disclosure, foreclosure limits, and tenant rights for rentals in HOA communities. Thousands of families would now be protected from future Karen Whitmores. My electrician business exploded too. Word got around that I was the guy who beat the HOA. Clients called not just because I knew wiring, but because I knew how to stand up for people. The first annual Willowbrook Freedom Festival was scheduled for the following month. Food trucks, live music, and neighborhood workshops on HOA reform filled the program. Emma, true to form, organized a voter registration booth. Civic engagement beats passive compliance, she said, sounding older than her years. My evidence room became something of a museum. Neighbors brought their kids by to see the timeline and documents that dismantled Karen's empire. I'd point to the wall of files and tell them, this is what happens when good people document bad behavior. But the sweetest victory wasn't about laws, money, or even festivals. It was simple. Last weekend, a young couple with 2 toddlers moved into the house once owned by the Martinez family. They knocked on my door, asking nervously about the neighborhood. I could finally smile and say, this is a community where people look out for each other. That's what we built. What started as survival had grown into something real, a neighborhood where fear no longer lived. Across the country, my story was spreading. The HOA Abuse Survivors website was averaging 50,000 monthly visitors, sharing resources, templates, and guides for fighting back. People were finding hope because one man refused to roll over. If you've survived HOA harassment, drop your story in the comments. Share this video with anyone dealing with a neighborhood bully. Because here's the truth, bullies count on your silence. Communities create accountability. And sometimes the sweetest revenge is refusing to be afraid. Justice tastes better when it's shared, with neighbors who have become family. Thanks for watching HOA Stories. If this episode made you laugh, rage, or shake your head at HOA madness, hit that like button and leave your thoughts below. We post new HOA chaos and neighborhood showdowns every week, so subscribe, and don't miss the next unbelievable story.